All right, it is that time of day. Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to Adobe Live. My name is Terry White, worldwide photography evangelist here at Adobe. It's my pleasure to be streaming to you live once again on my favorite day, Friday, Masterclass Friday. For those of you who are watching on the various places you could be watching this on, you could be on YouTube, you could be on Twitter, you could be on Facebook, you could be everywhere, you could be anywhere watching this. That's cool. Hang out wherever you feel comfortable hanging out. But if you want to participate in the chat, if you want me to see your questions, if you want me to see whatever it is you want to say, then head over to b.net slash Adobe Live. So b.net, behance.net slash Adobe Live is where I'm looking at the chat. So Sandy, I see you over there on Facebook and I see Angelo, but if you want to see, and Angelo all the way from Taiwan, but if you want me to see any future comments, head over to b.net slash Adobe Live. So same goes for the folks hanging out on YouTube. I see Bradley over there. Glad you're there. But if you want to see, if you want me to see you, if you want me to see you with Sean and Clarissa and Steve and Michelle, head over to b.net slash Adobe Live. All right. So with that said, um, I should make a pre-recording about how to watch. I should make a pre-recording about how to watch it. Okay. Cool. Yeah, there are people from all over the world. And with that said, today we're going to have some fun. We're going to talk about some Photoshop filters, and these are Photoshop filters that everyone should know. And most of you probably already do know most of these, and I'm sure there's a couple I'm going to show you that either you knew and haven't used in a long time, or you never saw because no one talks about them, or most people don't talk about them anymore. That doesn't mean they're not cool. It just means they're not the new great thing that everyone's using, so therefore people don't usually talk about it. All right, so first and foremost, this is Photoshop, so I'm not going to really be doing any Lightroom today. So for my photographers in the room that are afraid of Photoshop, this is going to be pretty easy, pretty straightforward. I'm even going to show you some ways to do it to where you can't mess up. It's non-destructive. And even if you mess up, there's really, just as long as you don't save, you should be good. All right, so Photoshop filters have been around almost as long as Photoshop. I think almost back to at least version 1 or 2. Certainly version 2 or 3 had filters. And years and years and years of filters. And filters have been around and been improved, and new filters have been added, the new neural filters, which we'll touch on those as well. Filters continue to be improved and added over the years. And they basically just give you ways of adding special effects or looks to your image. So traditionally, for a photography masterclass, I teach everyone just simply how to make your images look better, how to recompose, how to retouch, how to adjust the image, how to do local adjustments, how to do all the stuff in Lightroom, and that's all great. But at some point, you're going to want to go beyond just making the image look good, just making the image look technically correct. You're going to want to do some more extensive work, and that's really where filters shine. It's really where filters come in. All right, so with that said, let me head over to my desktop so you guys can see what I'm doing here. I got an empty Photoshop open because I want to start from scratch. I'm going to be grabbing, I think, all my images from the library. I think I got them all in my library, but you can, of course, open up your images any way that you open up your images today in Photoshop. So I've got a couple of these first ones in the library. Let's go ahead and open up one of these. And these are, I'll tell you when they're Adobe stock and I'll tell you when they're mine. So this is an Adobe stock image, and I found this image because this is a perfect example for the first filter I'm going to show you. First filter I'm going to show you is Liquify. And this is not, not a dig against this guy or any person on stock or anybody else, because we all have these things going on that really no one pays attention to in person. But when you have an image frozen in time, and especially in high resolution, people study the image. They look at it like it's on screen for so long, you can't help but notice certain things about a person's appearance. So again, this is not a go into Photoshop and make everyone beautiful. This is not a go into Photoshop and make everyone, more beautiful, I should say. Not go into Photoshop and totally change someone's appearance. It's basically, I only do these things if they ask, meaning I don't usually proactively go do these things because I think they should be done. I go in when people say, hey, I got this thing. Can you touch it up? Can you remove it? That's when I'll do it, when they ask for it. So I think last Masterclass, I showed an example of a prom picture, I think it was, and the mom wanted the daughter to smile. So I showed how to do that with this filter I'm going to show you now. And again, I wouldn't have done it. She requested it. So that's the only reason I showed it. So just to get me off the hook of don't go out saying Terry says you should make people look different. No, I'm saying only if they request it. All right, so with that said, first filter we're going to talk about is, in fact, Liquify. Now, I said I would show you ways to not mess up, or at least some ways to not mess up. The Liquify filter, and many of the filters now support smart objects or smart filters. So the first thing you want to do if you want to do this non-destructively is you can do one of two things. If the filter supports it, we'll convert it for a smart filter. If the filter doesn't support it, then simply duplicate the layer. So if I duplicated the layer, that way if I mess up, I still have the original. I have the original in the library anyway if I don't save. It's a stock image. I could re-download it if I save. I have several ways. So if you don't always see me do this, A, because I'm doing a demo, B, because I usually have multiple ways to get back to the original image if I need to. It's in Lightroom, it's a stock image, it's this, it's that. So people like freak out if I don't duplicate the layer first, or if I don't make a smart object first. I'm going to be doing that in this class, but if you see me in a future class and I don't do it, know that I'm okay with not doing it. You should do it if you need to, but it's okay if other people don't do it if they don't need to. All right, so with that said, I'm going to throw away the extra layer because this particular filter does support converting for smart filters. So the first thing you should do when you're going to apply a filter, if you want to experiment and you don't want to ruin the original image, is this is your first step every single time. That way, you got to get out of jail free card. If you mess up, you can always undo the filter. And also just simply not saving the image will help you. But this is the proper way to do it. So convert for smart filters. That will take my background and convert it into a layer, and you can see a little icon in the lower right-hand corner. That little smart icon, that little icon of a image with a square taken out of it. I have no idea why that represents a smart object, but it does. That's a smart object now. So that means that I basically have taken this layer, this background, and put it in a Tupperware container, and now I can do anything to the outside of the Tupperware, which is filters, and it won't wreck the stuff that's on the inside, which is the image. All right, so now that we got that, we're going to go in and go to filter, and we're going to go to Liquify. And now that'll bring up the Liquify interface. So it brought up an entire new window on top of the other window. Most of the newer, more modern filters have a complete new workspace that they open up into. Remember, some of the older filters I'm going to show open up in a little bitty window or panel with a small preview, but the new filter experience is this, where you get a nice giant window that you can resize, and it basically gives you a nice workspace to work in for your for whatever the filter does. Now, this particular filter we've used it for years to push stuff around. That's why it's called Liquify, because it basically imagine if this were a painting and it were completely wet. If it was completely wet and you took your finger and you smudged it, you would see the smudge. If you took a brush and you moved some of the paint over, you would see the paint move over. So going into the Liquify filter basically will put the image into that mode. So you can push it around, you can stretch it, distort it, improve it, destroy it, anything in between as a liquid image. Now, the very first tool is the warp tool, forward warp tool in the Liquify filter. And if I make my brush bigger, which that's the right bracket key, on a US keyboard, that's the letter, the bracket keys are next to the letter P. So right bracket makes it bigger, left bracket makes it smaller. And if I were to come over to his ear and start pushing, I'm pushing his ear in. So I'm moving his ear, I'm pushing it in. This is not what I wanted to do, but I'm just showing you that this is Liquify. So we can make Spock ears if we wanted to. Like that's the kind of stuff you do in Liquify. You can have fun with an image. You can distort an image. You can play with an image. You can get an image looking the way you want. Now, let's say I played with this image. And let's do the other ear while we're at it. Again, that's not why I came into this image, but I just wanted to show what Liquify is. So he's now a Vulcan. I made him a Vulcan now. And if I were to now click OK, you notice that because I did it as a smart filter first, Spock mode, yes. Because I did a smart filter first, it does a special thing on the layers panel. It shows me that I have smart filters, which means you can have more than one. So I could go do another filter and it would just stack onto this one. And also, and by the way, there's even some cool stuff that you could do with stacking order for filters as smart filters. But anyway, you notice there's a little eye next to the whole smart filter category. And then there's a little eye next to Liquify. So if you had multiple filters stacked up, you can turn them all off and just get back to the way the original image looked by turning off the eye in front of smart filters. Or you could turn off the individual filter by clicking on the eye in front of it. So for example, if I turn off Liquify, his ears go back to normal. Because I enabled that as a smart filter first, I can always go back in, I can always play, I can always turn it off, I can even throw it away and say, nope, I don't want to do this anymore, return it back to the original image and put it back. So that's what, and Sandra just learned something. I did not know about stacking filters. Yeah, so just because I talked about it, let me go ahead and do another one. I'll show you an example of a stack. Let's go into Let's go into blur and do Gaussian blur. Just for this, that's a bit much, but let's pull it down a bit and let's just make him slightly out of focus with Gaussian blur. And so now if I click OK, now those two filters are stacked. And if they were the kind of filters that mattered the stacking order, then I just rearranged it so I put Liquify on top. It doesn't matter because blur is blur and Liquify is Liquify. It doesn't matter what order they're in. But if it was two filters where the order mattered, you can put the filter on top that mattered most or should be first, if that makes sense. And so that I can stack as many filters as I want and always, oh, I don't want the blur anymore, turn the blur off. He gets nice and sharp again, but I still have the ears. Turn the ears off, but turn the blur on. So that's the beauty of working with smart filters first, is that you get all this flexibility. If I did not work with smart filters first, for example, let's open up this next image. Okay, and let's zoom him out. And I were to go into Liquify and do the same thing. Filter, Liquify, and smaller brush. And he's already got Spock ears. It's one of our engineers, so he doesn't mind. He's already got Spock ears. Anyway, I give him more Spock ears, and I click OK. Because I didn't do smart filter first, when I click OK, that's been applied to the image. There's no going back and turning it off or whatever. Now I can undo while I'm still here, and I can not save it, and I can revert the image back. But if you don't do a smart filter layer first, then you're kind of saying, I want this permanent. Because once you move on, and once you get past your undos, that becomes a permanent thing you've done. So just keep that in mind, that if you want the flexibility to always go back, then definitely do your smart filters first. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to just revert this. File revert, gets rid of everything you've done to the image, puts the image right back to the original state that it was last saved in. Baby Spock. All right, so anyway, back to this image. Now, again, I have the Liquify, I have the Gaussian blur, I can turn them on and off and restack them. And by the way, let's say that was not enough blur. The other advantage of having the smart filter first, or do the smart filter first, is that you can double click. And yes, I know, thank you. You can double click and go right back into it. So I'm back in the Gaussian blur with the exact setting I had it on. So if I want to bump up the setting or turn the setting down, I can turn it down. I get right back to where it was before after I last left it. So when I click OK, now that's the new Gaussian blur. And again, I can turn that on, turn it off, double click. Oh, that's too much, and come back. And by the way, remember I said older filters have this small window experience? This is an example of an older filter that has the, here, let me zoom out. Zoom out. There we go. Zoom out. There we go. That has the small window experience. And this is what we used to deal with compared to that big giant window for Liquify. So as you can tell, Gaussian blur has been around for years, and therefore it has that small window. It hasn't been updated. All right, so if you decide, hey, I don't want any of this stuff, I was just playing around, then I can grab Smart Filters, drag it down to the trash, and now they're all gone. Just like that. I threw away everything I did. I'm back to the original image as a smart object, and I can just keep going. Okay, next up. What did I really want to bring this up for? So let's go back into Smart Filter, or let's go back into Liquify. The reason we weren't trying to make Spock ears, that was just a playing around example. You got all these tools for distorting, pinching, pushing, moving the liquid around. And then you come all the way down to this little silhouette of a person, and this is for the face tool. So if I click the face tool, it identifies this image as, or I shouldn't say that. It looks for faces in your image. 1, 2, 3, how many ever faces you have. So in other words, this image has one face and it's found it. And as I hover around different parts of the image, it knows that's the nose, it knows that's an eye, it knows that's the other eye, it knows that's the mouth. It knows this is the face shape. It knows if I come out, that's the face, that's the ears. So it knows different parts of the image because it's already done that intelligence to figure it out. So for example, if I come over to the face, by the way, even if I couldn't like hover over the individual pieces, all of it's over here on the panel. So it's all identified. The eyes are identified, left and right, the nose, the mouth, it's all here as sliders. So even if you don't want to interact with it on the canvas, you can go over to the sliders and just drag sliders left or right to do what you want. So for example, if I come down to the mouth and I drag it up, we can make them smile. And I think that's funny. I just think that's cool that you can do that. Anyway, now you can't open his mouth and get teeth. We're not there with this particular filter. But anyway, you get the ability to just add a little bit of grin, a little bit of smile to a person, or not, or take it down and make them frown a little bit. So either way, and that's cool. But the main reason I downloaded this particular stock image is because he has a problem that a lot of us have. I shouldn't say a problem. He has a attribute that a lot of us have, and that's one eye appears to be bigger than the other one. It's just that it's more open. It's not really bigger. It's just more open than the other eye. And that could happen with any eye. You just have one eye that's a little bit more closed than the other one when you take the picture. All right, so next up, what we can do with the eye, and I could go and show you the sliders for it. So we have the left and right eye. We have the eye size, eye height, eye width, eye tilt, and eye distance. So you can even adjust the, look at that. You can even adjust the distance between the eyes. So if you thought your eyes were too close together, you can move them further apart. All right, so eye size. I'm just going to take the size down a bit with that slider. And eye height, I'm going to take the height down a bit with that slider. And I'm just going to open or close that one up a little bit, but I'm also going to take the one on the right, and just to balance it out, I'm going to open that one up a little bit more. So that way, it's not going to be perfect because now it looks like the pupil on that side, my right side looks bigger, but actually we kind of balanced it out so the eyes are at least the same amount of openness. Lazy eye, yep, that's a good one. So you can do that kind of thing as well. Now, you might say, well, what's the shape for? The shape is literally for people that think their face is too wide or too skinny or whatever. You can adjust. And by the way, this isn't just because you think it. It might be that your image looks wider than normal simply because of the lens it was shot with. If it was shot with a wide angle lens, guess what? We're all going to look wider. So what you can do with this is you can simply use it to bring your face back to the shape it should be. Okay, that's what Liquify is for when coming from a face perspective. That's actually crazy, I know, right? A lot of people just forgot Liquify is there or didn't really know about all the face stuff that's there. I'm not sure I can do it with the nose. Can I make, yep, there we go. Think your nose is too wide, too narrow, just bring it down or bring it back to what you think it should be based on your other photos. All right, so click OK. Because that is a smart object, I can double click and get right back to where I was and adjust everything as if if I want less smile now, I can bring the smile back down. So convert for smart filters first, and you get a ton of flexibility of going back and changing your mind or undoing or stacking or all kinds of things. If you don't convert it first, you're saying, I'm a pro, I know what I'm doing, I'm never going to change my mind, my client's not going to change their mind, I can do it this one time and be done with it. And sometimes that's the case, depends on what it is. All right, so this other one, I could do a face liquify, but I want to show you just another. I don't use the face that much. What I use liquify for is a totally different thing. So first and foremost, filter. Actually, you know what? I'm going to show it on a different image. I'm going to show it on this image because this is a perfect example. I've shown this image before. A perfect example of when I use liquify. If you're photographing someone and the clothes matter, which they should, you don't want the clothes to look too big. So for example, he's just got some excessive bulges in his sweater and in his pocket here on the side that just make the clothes look bigger than they should. So that's a prime candidate for when you'd use Liquify. So filter, convert for smart filter, so we can always go back. And by the way, that ear is sticking out more than the other one because it's closer to the camera. So just that would be another reason why you might do it. Liquify. And then if I grab that forward warp tool, and you always want to make your brush slightly bigger than the thing you want to push. So just a little bit bigger than that thing in this pocket or this pocket itself. And we're just going to push, just going to tuck that in. Now, the other thing you have to worry about is the background. Like, is the background a pattern that's getting distorted when you do that? This is, but it wouldn't be as noticeable. And I could always go back in and clean up that background if I needed to. But just be mindful that we can tell if you liquefied something, if the background got distorted around the area you liquefied. We call those Photoshop fails. All right, so let's zoom into this, this area here. Zoom out a little bit and grab our warp tool. And make our brush smaller and smaller yet. And we're just going to pull that wrinkle in. And again, if your background is being uncooperative, you might need to do. Now, another thing that we used to have a problem with is if you did something too close to the edge, this could happen. See that little gap I just created? That's a dead giveaway. You use Liquify because you were on the edge and you didn't see that you pulled the edge of the photo in and it left a hole there. So let's zoom out and let me show you this checkbox in the upper right hand corner. Pin edges. When that is on, which I normally always have that on, then even if you're on the edge, you cannot pull the edge in. I can distort the whole thing, but I cannot pull the edge in. It will not let me. So if I'm on the edge here and I'm trying to work on this little wrinkle, I don't have to worry about the edge being pulled in by mistake. So that's another, just pin edges is something I always have on when I'm using Liquify for that reason. Now with that ear, there's a pattern there in the background, so it's going to be a little difficult, but I just want to show you something. Well, let me show you this too while we have this image open. That way I won't have to open up another image. There's a tool called the freeze mask tool, the letter F. So if you hit the letter F while you're in Liquify, that will give you a masking tool. And all it does is mask. It's not doing anything to the image. You're basically telling it, don't do anything to this part of the image. So now, if you go back to your warp, and by the way, if I do this by his ear, and I go back to the warp tool, and I now pull his ear in, that part that that's a little much, that part that I painted won't ever be pulled. Because you're saying, I'm locking that area of the image in and nothing can be distorted, nothing can be pulled in that red mask. The red mask doesn't stay there. As soon as you click OK, it disappears. But that's a quick way to show to lock down parts of the image that you don't want to move because they will look like you did it on the image. Like this one, if I really were paying attention, I would freeze this because this got pulled in. So I'd go back and do a better job of that. But just I wanted to point out that that technique has been there as well so that you don't accidentally have a Photoshop fail because you pull something in or pull something in from the sides. All right, so that's the Liquify filter. We got to keep moving because I won't get through the other 6 at this rate. So I'm going to close this. Don't save, close, don't save, close, don't save. See, I didn't need all those layers or anything because I'm not going to save any of that stuff. All right, next up, let's go in and grab image number 2. All right, this is an image I shot. The other ones I showed so far were stock. This is an image I shot while I was in Hilton Head, South Carolina, and it needs some work. This is just the out of the camera image. I didn't do anything else to it. But I would normally do all of this in Lightroom because that's where it would be. But if I open this image or an image like this in Photoshop and I thought, oh my God, it needs all kinds of adjustments, I would first go to Convert for Smart Filters. After it converts for Smart Filters, which is a fairly large image, so it's going to take a second. But after it converts for Smart Filters, I would then go into my favorite filter of all time, and that's the Camera Raw filter. Because the Camera Raw filter gives me Camera Raw on a layer. You can apply this to any layer, any kind of layer, and you basically get the Lightroom experience or the Camera Raw experience on a layer. So this way you get to do anything you need to do. I'm not going to get any raw profiles because it opened it up as a layer, but I can go ahead, for example, and click Auto, and that will auto-tone the image. I can go in and adjust the temperature of the image, warm it up a little bit. I can go in and adjust the exposure of the image and just make it just a little bit more dramatic. I can increase my shadow brightness. I can add a little texture to the image to sharpen it up a little bit. I can add some dehaze to the image to kind of bring out some of that stuff in the background as well. I can add more vibrance and more saturation to the image to kind of bring out those sunrise colors. So I can do all of this with easy sliders in the Camera Raw image on any layer. That's what I love about it. Now, you notice there's a tool you don't get while you're here. You don't get the crop tool because if you were in Lightroom or Camera Raw, you would crop the image. But if you're in Photoshop, you would use Photoshop's crop tool to crop the image. So you don't get cropping capability here because the image does need to be straightened out. That horizon's crooked. But anyway, I would be able to do everything else while I'm here and then just go crop it in Photoshop like I normally would. So I just wanted to point out, I know that's crooked. I know it needs to be straightened. We would straighten it normally in Lightroom, but in this case, we would straighten it in Photoshop because we're in Camera Raw already. All right, so that will give me a little more saturation there. Click OK. So that will give me the Camera Raw stuff that I just added. And again, I could turn off Smart Filters, turn it on, and see my before and after. If I forgot something, the best part is I can always double click and get right back into it. And all my sliders are right where I left them. And I can say, oh, the exposure's a little too bright. Let's bring it back down a little bit. And by the way, I forgot to do some things. So let's go in and add a little, not color grading. What do I want? I want some effects maybe. No, I want, I don't know what I want. Yeah, let's add a little vignette to it. Darken those edges just a little bit. All right. And we'll click OK there. And that becomes the newer image based on what I just did as the Camera Raw filter. So yeah, Camera Raw as a filter, my #1 absolute favorite filter in Photoshop, hands down, bar none, because it gives me all that control with simple sliders. I don't have to go to levels. I don't have to go to curves. I don't have to go to all the adjustments we've used for the last 3 decades in Photoshop. I can just do it all in one filter. So for people that are old school and you like curves and you like levels and you like all that other stuff, hue, saturation, all that other stuff, great. I prefer the Camera Raw filter simply because it's faster and easier. You do you. All right. It updates the Photoshop file. It just updates the file in Photoshop, no new file. Correct. It does, yeah. So when I'm done, does the file become a JPEG? No, the file is whatever file format it was in. So it doesn't become anything. It's a layer in Photoshop. So if you save this as a Photoshop file, it's a Photoshop file with that layer, with that smart object. If you export it out as a JPEG, it's a JPEG with those adjustments without the layers. So it does, just think of it as I just ran a filter. It's not camera raw, like to the camera raw file format. It's not Lightroom, whereas Lightroom's doing it non-destructively, adding metadata. It's a filter. So just think of it as I brought that interface in as a filter and I applied it as a smart filter. That's it. So the file is not changed, it's separate. The file is not changed because I made it a smart object, but if I hadn't made it a smart object, then it would permanently change the file. So again, you're thinking raw. This is not a raw file. This is a JPEG or a PSD or whatever. It could be a GIF, it could be whatever. Just you've applied a filter to it. So stop thinking camera raw as a file format. Think of this as I'm in Photoshop and I applied a filter, because that's exactly what you did. All right, next up, let's go into have a little fun. I'm going to close this and not save it. And let's go back and let's open up this one and edit. All right, this is another stock image. I did not shoot this one. And we're going to do a few things to this image. So first, we might even get into some stacking here. So let's go into Convert for Smart Filters. For example, this is a JPEG. So if I ran camera raw filter on this, this would still be, if I saved it, it would still be a JPEG. But if I add the layer in camera raw filter as a smart object, then it would be a PSD or TIFF. All right, but anyway, we're not going to do that. We're going to go and do a couple things. So we got this kid, and the kid is taking off in their toy car, and they've got some stuff on the wall. It makes it look like, you know, hey, they're really flying. Well, the cars are sitting still. Let's make it look like it's actually moving. So first and foremost, I'm going to do a couple things. I want undo. I'll say it. So let's start from scratch. I want the kid on his own layer. So let's go to select subject and let's duplicate that layer. So Command J on the Mac, PC Control J, or a layer create copy from, create a new layer from copy. All right, so now I've got the kid on its own layer. Not the best cutout in the world, especially around the tires, but that's okay for what I need. And now what I want to do is I want to kind of fill in. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I want to fill in that background with the stuff. In other words, I want to remove the car. So I'm going to do one more time. I'm going to do a select subject. And for the sake of people saying, oh my God, you're going to wreck the image. Duplicate the layer, turn the background off. All right, now we're in the copy. Okay, so now let's go into select subject. And now we're going to grow that selection a little bit. So grow, no. We're going to modify expand, not grow. Modify expand brings up a panel. I'm just going to expand it out just because I want a relatively loose selection around this. Let's expand it out by 20 pixels. And that's not quite enough, so let's expand it out a little bit more because it all depends on the resolution of the image, and this is a stock image. I have no idea what the resolution is. Expand, let's do 20 more pixels. There we go. So I got a looser selection around the whole thing. Now I'm going to go in and just simply Shift Delete to use Content Aware Fill that out. Now again, it's not going to be perfect because it's going to pull in from all areas to remove that, but I just want to get rid of most of it. It's thinking about it. Yeah, okay. Again, that's about what I expected. I did not need it to be perfect because remember, we already have the perfect one on top. So I just wanted to get rid of a lot of it from the background. Now that I've done that, and I've got my background, and I've got we'll call this layer kid. We've got our kid, we've got our background. Now we can go in and play. So I want to go into filter, convert for smart filters for the kid layer. And that will make that into a smart object. And we'll also do the same thing for the background layer. Filter, convert for smart filters. All right, so now we got two layers that we care about. We have our backup background layer. And now we're going to go to the kid layer and we're going to apply a new filter. This one's going to go into our blur gallery and we're going to go to spin blur. So spin blur, what's the difference between modify, expand, and grow? Modify, expand means take your existing selection, go out. Grow means select the kinds of things that were already selected in other parts of the image. So that's not what I wanted. All right, so now we've got this spinny thing. I'm going to move it over to the wheels, and we're going to make it smaller because it doesn't need to be the whole car. There we go. And now we can also even crank up the amount of blur. So we can really make that wheel look like he or she is, I can't tell, he or she is like driving fast. We're going to click another one here, and we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to scale it down. And we could use the exact same amount if I went in the panel and looked at the numbers, but I don't care. I'm just going to make those wheels really look like they're moving fast. Okay, so now the wheels are really moving fast, and that's awesome. But that doesn't mean anything else is moving. The wheels are spinning real fast in place. So that's why we did this separately for the background. So we click OK. And it's rendering. I see a progress bar in my other monitor there. There it is. And now we go to the background, which again, we have that blur gallery as a separate smart filter. We can go ahead and turn it off, blah, blah, blah. Now let's go into this filter for the background copy. We're going to go into filter, blur, motion blur. Now we're on the background. So we're just going to make our background more blurry. More. There we go. Just enough to give it that motion, like the car is not sitting still. And you might ask, you might have asked, well, why did I need to fill in the background? Because this was the step that I knew if I didn't fill in the background, remember, all we did was take the kid in the car and put it on its own layer, but the kid in the car was still in the original background. If I had not removed most of it from the original background, then what would happen is we'd see the edges of the car and the kid when we did this motion blur, because it would still be technically there. So now we don't see any of that stuff because the car is covering up everything else. And you could change the angle. So if you needed to go uphill, downhill, whatever, you can rotate this around and get the angle just right. But we just need him or her to go straight ahead. And we can apply as much blur as we want. And that also is kind of cool in the clouds and a little drawing there of the airplane. Okay, now we're going to take this up one more notch. We're going to add yet another filter to this. So far in this one, you saw two filters. You saw the blur gallery spin blur, and you saw the motion blur. So that was filters 3 and 4. So filter number 5 is one of my favorite filters, and this is a filter you always want to do on an empty layer, because if you don't do it on an empty layer, you won't be able to control it after the fact. So I'm going to create an empty layer first, and it's nicely sandwiched in between the car and the background. That's cool, and we'll call this one tree. And it's just for the fun of it, because I don't need a tree in this image, but because we've got it here, we can apply it. So we got our tree layer here. And now we're going to go to our filter menu, come down to render. So render is always the filters that create things that weren't there. So in other words, give me something that wasn't already in the image. No, not render clouds. Oh my God, don't make me. Anyway, not render clouds. By the way, so for someone who doesn't get the joke, render clouds goes back to like Photoshop, I don't know, 2 or 3, like way back in the day. And back then it was, I guess, revolutionary. Today it looks awful. It just looks so fake and awful. So yeah, don't render clouds. Render difference clouds wasn't that bad. And you would actually have to do it on an image. It doesn't do it on a blank layer. But those are old. Don't do those. Anyway, notice they're separated by a line. That line means something. Everything below that line is old. Everything above this line is new. So I'm going to go ahead and do tree filter. That brings up a separate window. And it's kind of cool because you literally can render a tree from nothing. So what kind of tree do you want? And you literally pick whatever tree you want. You want a palm tree? I think I want a palm tree. All right, great. Got a palm tree. You can even change the direction of the light for the palm tree. So now the light's more to the right side of the tree, coming in that way. You can choose the amount of leaves the tree will have. So you can have more leaves, less leaves, so forth and so on. And palm tree actually is not a good example for this because you really can't see what's going on here. I mean, you can kind of see it, but it's not that bit much. Let's go to a different kind of tree. Let's go to, oh, so many choices. Let's go to an elm tree. I think you'll really be able to see it there. Yeah, an elm tree. Okay. So light direction, left, right. You're just basically literally rotating the light around even though it's not in 3D. Leaves amount, you can really bring down the amount of leaves. You can bring them down to pretty much barren or dead tree, which is kind of cool. You can change the size of the leaves. So if you want tiny leaves on a baby tree, tree that's growing up, or a tree that's fully grown, you can get that. You can get the branches height. So you can get a nice tall tree or a nice short tree, depending on what you want. I think a taller, right about there would be good. And you can also control the branch thickness. So you want, again, want that baby tree, that brand new tree that you just planted, or you want that tree that's been around for a few years. So lots of options there for your trees, and there's even some advanced options as well. You can get into custom colors for the leaves, custom colors for the branches, all kinds of shading options. So if you really are into trees, you can do all of that. Okay, so now once we decide on the look of our tree, I think the thickness is a little still too thick here. Once we get into you can also randomize the shapes. So that's actually kind of nice. Once you get into, I'm just trying to, actually, ooh, I kind of like that one. Oh, I'll never get it again because it was random. All right, I like that one. All right, anyway, once you get into the tree looking the way you want, you click OK, and because we created it on a new layer, it's on a new layer. So that means it can now be moved around. It can be filtered. It can be whatever. If you don't create a new layer first, then you will end up with it on whatever layer you had selected, and you won't be able to move it. You won't be able to resize it. You won't be able to do anything with it because it's just like you painted a tree on that layer. All right, so now if I go to the Move tool, that tree layer can be moved around. So I can put it wherever I want, kind of back there, out of the way a little bit. I can free transform and scale it. So if I thought the tree was too big, I scale it down. And that looks a little bit better there. And I'm going to show you another trick. So now that we got the tree in place, the next trick that we're going to do is now, so we got this tree now, remember it's a layer, so it's fair game to do anything else we want to do to it. So if I were to go into my filter menu and convert for smart filters, it gets the same smart object treatment. But remember we did the motion blur on the background? Well, the tree would technically be standing still. It wouldn't be moving with the car. So it should kind of probably have the same blur. So if I hold down my Option or Alt key and I drag the, and drop the motion blur onto that tree layer, it should copy it and apply it. Oh, it did it. I just didn't see it. But it didn't do it. Hang on. Undo. Yeah, I did it 2 or 3 times. There we go. But it's not doing it as a smart filter. Hang on. Interesting. It's doing it, but it's not giving me the controls. Oh, yeah, they were just twirled up. I was going to say, it's not giving me the controls, but it did. They were just twirled up, so I couldn't see them. All right, so that way, you get the exact same look to the tree as the background because it's the same filter, same options, same everything. So, yep, expand the tile. I know. The chat's catching up to what I hadn't done yet. All right, so expand the tile, yes. And that way you get to see everything. All right, next up, one more while we're here. And this is going to be filter number 6, I think. 5 or 6. Anyway, 5, I think. All right, I'm going to go to my pen tool because with this particular filter, you have to do it on a path. And you can do a new layer first. So if I want it, I can go do a new layer. There we go, new empty layer. And you probably should do a new layer first. I'm going to go to my pen tool, and I'm going to draw out, I'm going to start drawing a path on this paper airplane trail. There we go. And we just kind of get it looking similar to the paper airplane. All right, now that we got that in place, next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to filter, and we're going to go to render one more time. And all we did was create a path. The path could be a filled in shape. It could be whatever, but it needs a path. You're going to go to the flame filter, because the flame filter works on a path. So once I go to flame filter and I bring it over so you can see it, see, it mimics the path that I created. Now you get the same kind of things you saw with the tree filter. We can go in, we can apply, make the flame length longer. We can make the flame width taller. So that's a little bit much. So we want to make it look like the kid's really taking off like a rocket. So a little bit more flame there, a little bit less width there. We can also adjust the angle. So the flames are kind of like shooting out from the back or the sides. There we go. You can also adjust the interval. How much flame, how little flame, how much space is in between each one. So very little space in between each one. And you can randomize the length if you want. That'll also help me with the angle. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Perfect. I wanted to kind of match that angle of the plane going up in the air. There we go. I love it. All right, so now we click OK. And that will create your flame on its own layer. And if you want, you don't need the path anymore. You can just delete the path because you've got the flame. Oh, one too many. You got the flame exactly where you created it. Now, again, because we did it on its own layer, that means we can do whatever we want. We can move it around, get it in position, tilt it, distort it, do whatever we want, warp it, get it, blur it, do whatever we want to it because it's on its own layer. Clearly, I have no imagination. I thought it was an arrow. No, it's a paper airplane. I can see, I've made many of these back in the day, so I knew exactly what that was when I saw it. All right, so that's 3, 4, and 5. So that's the most, or actually that's 3, the blur gallery, 4, motion blur, 5, the tree and flame filters. And now let's go on to number 6. So you can have fun with filters. You can be more creative. You can do cool things like this to make your photography look more actionable. All right, next up, let's get into neural filters. So I'm not going to get into all the neural filters. I'm just going to show one that I would use on a regular basis because I've had to do this work before in the past and it takes a lot of time. So let's say you had a black. Now this was probably I'm judging by the age of these kids and the look of this photo, that this was shot probably in color and converted to black and white. But if you had an old black and white photo that you did not have in color and you wanted to see what it would look like in color, then there's a neural filter for you. So let's go into convert for smart filters. I think the neural filters work with smart filters. We're about to find out. And we go to filter and we come down to neural filters. Neural filters were introduced a year ago. And you have the featured ones, which they consider to be finished and ready to go. And then you have the beta ones, which they're still working on. So that means that they're still adding new features and tweaking them and getting the models just right. These are AI-based filters that are designed to augment your photography. So for example, if we were to click Colorize, one click, and I used to do this by hand, and it took hours, if not days, to take a black and white photo and colorize it. And this is, again, an AI, so it's not going to be perfect. I can see areas like her neck looks a little too green, and his hair is not the right color, and so forth and so on. But that's okay. Because if this got me 80 to 90% of the way there, and I just had to fix those 2 things or 3 things, who cares? Like this would save me hours in colorizing old photos. I remember this one group shot I did, this old photo of my mom and dad when they were, just getting married, whatever, and it took me literally days to colorize it by hand, layer by layer, pixel by pixel, trying to, guessing what the colors would look like, and just to make it look right, days. If I could click a button and get there, get 90 or 80 or 70% of the way there with a click, and all I have to do is tweak, I'll take that all day long. So check out the Colorize filter. There are other filters, Smart Portrait, those are kind of fun. Makeup Transfer is a fun one as well. Depth Blur, Super Blue, these are all cool filters to play with, but just know that you've got these neural filters to tweak. Now, if you, never mind, don't have time. I'm going to click OK. I was going to show you some ways to tweak it if the color wasn't right, just right. But anyway, now that that's a neural filter, I can always turn it on, turn it off, go back into it, play with it, delete it, so forth and so on, and get right back to my original. So check out the neural filters. They're cool. All right, I want to get into the next couple before we run out of time. We're like down to 4 minutes left. And let's go into this one. Sharpening. I do most of my sharpening right in Lightroom or Camera Raw, but there's something to be said with the sharpening that's built into Photoshop. Now, there was two filters. The old filter for sharpening, the one that people have used for decades, is Unsharp Mask, even though it sounds backwards. Unsharp Mask is a tried and true filter for sharpening that's been around for decades. But you should transition. I shouldn't say you shouldn't use it anymore. You should transition to Smart Sharpen. Because Unsharp Mask was built on technology back in the 90s when your resolution wasn't that high and you didn't have multi megapixel images. Smart Sharpen is a much newer algorithm that just does a better job. So if you still, Unsharp Mask is still there for the people that love it, but really you should start taking a look at Smart Sharpen. All right, when I go to Smart Sharpen, look at what it does. And again, we get that nice big window interface if we want it. And there's not a lot to do. It's just really adjust the amount. So just by turning it on with whatever I had it on last, if we turn the preview off, that's the before. And let's zoom in a little bit more. There we go. There we go. That's before and after. So I would say that's a bit too much because they're starting to look like kind of little artifacts there. So preview is turning it on the canvas. So hold down the mouse button to see your before. That's what it used to look like. This is what it looks like now. So I'd bring that amount way down. Something more like that. There we go. So that's before, that's after. Looking at her eyes get sharper, but we don't see a bunch of artifacts on her skin. That's still maybe a little too much. I might bring it down a little bit more, or I might apply it and brush it in. So I might apply it multiple times and mask it in certain areas. So certain areas get sharper like the eyes and the skin gets less sharpened. But Smart Sharpen is definitely the filter I would use if I were trying to sharpen images in Photoshop today compared to what I would have used with Unsharp Mask back in the day. All right, I didn't do a smart filter first, but that's what you would do. All right, let's get out of that. Let's get to our last one before I run out of time, and that is, I think we did all 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Smart Sharpen was the 7th one, but I get to show you one because I got like 2 minutes left. This one is for a very specific problem. You have a blurry image, but it depends on what caused the blur. If the subject moved, the wind blew the flowers, then this doesn't work. If you moved, you shook the camera, then this will work. So this is called Filter, Sharpen, Shake Reduction. So shake meaning you, not the person, not the object, not the subject. Shake Reduction does just that. It looks for camera shake and can hopefully rescue an image that was shaken by you. Now, do I use this very often? No, because I've usually, if I'm taking a picture like this, I've shot it 20 times and hopefully one of those will not be shaken. But if you only had the one and it was the perfect one and it was the person that moved and, I mean, the person that was standing still and you moved and they're never going to get that expression back again and you just need that shot, then I would say try the camera shake reduction filter. Shake reduction filter. So you can also click to give it a point to focus on. You can draw out a new model. So by the way, so if I were to show you the before and after, that's the before, that's the after. Before, after. And you can even see the shake. You can see the lines in the flower are multiplied because the camera shook, or they're blurred a little bit more because the camera shook. But anyway, camera shake reduction, it's been around since 2013. I showed this back when Photoshop CC first came out. So it's been around for that long, 8 years, and you're just now seeing it. See, I told you I'd show you some filters you hadn't seen before or didn't know about. All right, so with that said, I am out of time. I had a couple more bonus ones, but we're not going to get to them today. We'll maybe do a tips and tricks class one day. And that's my time. So cheers, everyone. Stay tuned for the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. Cheers, everybody, and have a great weekend. And I won't see you next weekend because there's special programming and I'm traveling. But anyway, we'll see you the week after. Bye, everybody.